Laci Green put out a video asking anti-feminists to relay their experiences with feminists and feminists to relay their experiences with anti-feminists. I was a feminist and now I'm not, so actually I can answer both of these two questions from a first-hand experience. And I think I'm a bit different from many other people on YouTube in that I was raised into very different cultures. One is very traditional and one is very liberal. So I went through quite a struggle with self-identity and so forth, and pretty much came out with the conclusion that patriotism as an ideology is fucking bullshit. I won't go into that here, why, but I don't know, maybe in another video. Anyways, another thing that I think I differ from most other people is that unlike Cassie J and many other ex-feminists, I never had to put up with such a struggle like what Cassie J went through. It's almost like a Christian's journey into atheism. This is because, like I said before, I was by and large applying the correct method from the very beginning. So I was a feminist because from the available evidence I had then, I was convinced that women have it worse than men on the average in the world. Not necessarily in the Western world, but that didn't matter to me because the Western world is actually a minority population relative to the rest of the world. I was brought up in a society with a dominant traditionalism culture. And as I've mentioned in my video in response to V-Stream with Karen, I was brought up listening to all the bullshit about sons are rewards and daughters are paybacks. For those of you who don't know what that means, in a Chinese pagan religion and Taoism, people believed in reincarnation and karma. Basically what that means is that what you experience and or do in this life will affect you in the next life because the world through Tao is one of balance. So no one can have it too good or too bad. If you're somebody who is willing to sacrifice so much for other people, you will have a kind of a reward in the next life where you don't have to. But if you're extremely selfish and rich in this life, you will most likely end up poor in the next, etc. So people believe that if you have a son, it is a reward that you get in this life because in the last one you had it really bad or you were a really selfless person. On the other hand, if you have a daughter, that means that you had it too good in your last life or you were not selfless enough. I believe that, from this ideology, naturally people's behavior and attitude towards sons and daughters, and eventually men and women, will differ. So people will cherish sons at the expense of daughters, men at the expense of women. And by the way, ideology similar to this one is quite prevalent throughout most Asian and Middle Eastern countries, whether it's Hindu or Islamic. In more traditional societies, many of the laws will also be either more equal or in some extreme cases they favor men, at least on the surface. Which means that I also personally know and have experienced many cases where it is really the man who screwed over a woman. I can tell you one story of my aunt, my mother's older sister, who married this guy she was attracted to. Her parents were ardently against it. Not because they saw any character or personality flaw in the guy, because they don't actually know this guy and refuse to personally meet him. So it's not because of that, but because he dropped out of high school. So he doesn't even have a high school degree. So this is traditional society. People judge others in very materialistic ways. So my aunt's parents, my grandparents, cast her out of the house for choosing to be with him. After she was forced out of the home, she married this guy because, again, this is a very traditionalist society and men and women are supposed to live together, not married. The no sex before marriage thing. And she had a son. However, in that particular case, my grandparents turned out to be right for the wrong reasons, but they were right regardless. Because my aunt then found out that they didn't really have anything in common. So she wanted to get out of the relationship. She wanted a divorce. The guy then started to become abusive and frequently beat her. Yes, there were real domestic violence cases where men beat women. It does happen. Um, but because she was the one who initiates the divorce, in a society where divorce is pretty much frowned upon, the court ordered that she then must give up the child and he will take full custody of the child because she's the one who wanted a divorce and he doesn't. She had to agree to this with really no other choice, because she wanted out of the abusive relationship. And after that, the guy frequently used the boy, my cousin, to emotionally and psychologically abuse her. It's kind of like how one of the cases presented in the Red Pill movie, where the woman used the kid who she tried to make obese to emotionally and psychologically abuse her husband or her ex-husband. Um, yes, there are cases that men did something like this too, when the law was more in their favor. The boy, my cousin, unfortunately grew up mentally retarded as a result, and I don't remember the last time my aunt saw her son again. So, this is just one of many examples for why I was convinced to be a feminist. And when I was a feminist, it was really more about changing that culture of favoring men and sons by being independent, by demanding and earning respect from men. And I don't think I ever did any of the crazy things third wave feminists did. It was really all about I want to show that I can be just as respectable as men and I am in control of my own life and making my own decisions, things like that. I started to stop associating myself with the feminists when I met my last boyfriend, who is this very intelligent and wise guy who doesn't really hold back when he feels like he needs to say something. We never really had a serious discussion regarding feminism because, once again, like I said, feminism for me wasn't exactly ideological, like how feminism is for many feminists now. Both of us really enjoy movies set in Europe from the ancient period all the way to Enlightenment. And in many of these movies, they showed a lot of problems that women faced. They showed male problems too, but I think the women ones were more highlighted. Either that or I was having my tunnel vision. So during and after watching, we would discuss the movie, and I would bring these issues up, and he would bring up other issues. The first in particular was the fact that men had to go and die in wars and how horrible that was. I did have a bit of a resistance then because I instinctively argued that, well, men started those wars. And he will point out that it doesn't matter because, in the grand scheme of things, the men who start those wars were the ruling class and not the common people. We would then go into other debates and discussions. For example, men had harsher sentences, well, they still have harsher sentences. Uh, and while arranged marriage, for example, seems like women are getting raped or the worst end of the deal, but that might not be the case because men were forced to do the quote unquote raping. I mean, they also had to marry a woman that they don't want to marry and they have to have sex with. Basically, my ex was extremely good at arguing things from different sides, and I learned a lot from him in the discussion from this respect. Then during that time, I was already somebody who actively post comments and have debates and such online, especially YouTube. I started to have these debates with feminists, and then I realized not just how ignorant they are, but just how resistant they are to these ideas that they've never heard of in their life. To me, that's one thing that, really bugs me. It's one thing that you haven't figured out all the facts which led you to believe in something. It's another thing that when people presented those facts to you, you don't even engage in them, you don't even think about them, and then you just start to go for ad hominem attacks.
So this is when I realized that feminism was really just like another religion. Well, actually, many things are just like a religion because um, most people aren't taught to think using the correct methodologies. It's just what emotionally appealing to them. And then my ex discovered Karen Strong, and then I discovered her too. And then let's just say that we both got really red pilled because we both learned a lot of things from Karen that none of us knew. But one of the differences was for the both of us, the new knowledge was really, really exciting. And I think when you achieve real skepticism or something close to it with the correct methodology, that's one of the benefits. You're not scared of new knowledge, you find it exciting. And it's not surprising that feminists are not excited about new knowledge whatsoever. They want to shut it down. They want to gain up on you and tell you how you're misogynist and you do this because you want men to like you, you just don't understand it, etc. And so that's when I became an anti-feminist because they are a cult, and I am a self-described anti-cultist. One thing that I want to mention, which I think is important but very few people really think about, is that when it comes to gender issues, the important thing is to have empathy and sympathy towards each other. So that's why I talk to feminists frequently about men's issues, and I don't shy away from men from the manosphere who are biased against women at the same time. And I think most people don't like me for that because people, both men and women, naturally have tribalistic mentality where they want people to choose a side and stick with it. If you don't stick to one side, if you just really want to have a discussion, for example, you're on a fence and you want to play devil's advocate, or you want to present an argument and you want people to defend or argue against something that you heard of, but you haven't heard of any good counter arguments. If you do that, and people tend to um, think about what your intention is instead of just sticking to the argument. So if they think that your intention is you are actually supporting those arguments, even though you said you didn't. And then when you say that no, you just really want to hear another side to the issue, they tend to accuse you of backpedaling. That's something that people accuse me of doing a lot. Even the Bible authors wrote Jesus as saying, because you're neither hot nor cold, but lukewarm, I will spit you out of my mouth. So even if people are willing to be balanced as much as possible and have sympathy towards each other, this is still really hard. It's easier said than done, and I will tell you why. The first reason is obvious. It's because men and women experience very unique issues that neither side can truly empathize on a first person basis. So when I see a woman victim, I do get a stronger response usually because I can relate to her and what she's going through. However, that's not always the case. For example, my favorite TV series when I was a teenager was Angel, the spin-off from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I was many more times sympathetic towards the character Angel than Buffy. In fact, I hated her in the end for how she treated Angel, and that was when I was still a strong feminist. Many episodes involving male characters, in particular story arc regarding Angel and his sons, made me cry many times. Because growing up, my number one fear was losing the love of my parents, and I think I wanted better parents than what I have. So definitely it's less gender specific for me, but I think for most people it is gender specific. So that's one. The second reason, though, is that it is quite easy for men and women to have resentment towards each other. And that's because we are brought up to believe people are just good, and if you're a good person, you will find a special someone in your life, blah, blah, blah. And most people are heterosexual beings, so we're built to instinctively love the other sex. And when we are disappointed, even if once, it really hits hard. It really hits hard when a potential mate of yours does bad things to you. It affects you much more than if it's somebody of your own gender. And then you will end up hating members of that gender much more. So if you're a woman, you probably have just as many women who screw you over as men, but you will end up hating the men more. If you are a man, you probably have just as many men who screw you over as women, but you will end up hating women more. Now, I know there's an issue of the law, but I'm just talking about if you hold the law as a constant variable. This is just like if a stranger did something bad to you, you would dislike the stranger who did that very much, but you will get over it really quick if it's not something really, really detrimental. But if the same action was done by a close family member of yours, let's say your sibling or your parents, then you will much more likely to feel hate because you care about them more and you love them more. And as much as this is a cliche, love and hate do go together a lot. So, really, Laci, the only way around it is to use the correct methodology, to keep your personal emotion and bias at bay as much as possible, and to have a serious discussion. That's how you can really have a productive conversation with us. Good luck.